The vast emptiness of space stretched out before Jack Harper as he guided his cargo ship, the Stargazer, toward the looming silhouette of New Horizons Station. The station's metallic spires glinted in the light of a nearby star, a cold welcome to the weary space trucker. Jack's calloused hands gripped the controls, his face a mask of concentration. "Stargazer to New Horizon Control, requesting docking clearance," he said, his voice gravelly from disuse. A crackle of static preceded the curt response. "Clearance granted, Stargazer. Proceed to Bay 17. As Jack maneuvered the ship into the docking bay, an unease settled over him. 5 years had passed since he'd lost Sarah, his daughter, but the pain remained fresh. Each new station and new face was a reminder of his loss. The Stargazer shuddered as it locked into place. Jack powered down the systems, his movements mechanical from years of repetition. He grabbed his worn leather jacket and headed for the airlock. The station's air hit him like a wall, recycled and stale with an undercurrent of something acrid. Jack's nose wrinkled. "What's that smell?" he muttered. A nearby dock worker overheard. "Disinfectant," the man said nervously. "After the epidemic, can't be too careful." Jack's eyebrows furrowed. "Epidemic?" The worker looked at him incredulously. "You haven't heard? Wiped out an entire alien species, the empaths. The station's been on edge ever since." Jack nodded, absorbing the information. He'd been in deep space for months, cut off from galactic news. "Thanks for the heads up," he said, shouldering past the worker. As he made his way through the station's winding corridors, Jack noticed the tension in the air. Beings of various species huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed tones, while others hurried along with eyes downcast, avoiding contact. Jack reached the cargo bay and began the tedious process of unloading. As he maneuvered a hovercart loaded with crates, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He turned, squinting into the shadows between stacks of containers. For a moment, he thought he saw a pair of large, luminous eyes, unmistakably alien. Then, they were gone. Jack shook his head, chalking it up to fatigue. But as he continued working, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Hours later, as he was finishing up, he heard a soft noise behind him. Jack spun around, his hand instinctively going to the blaster at his hip. There, half hidden behind a crate, was a small figure. A child, Jack realized with a start, but not human. The girl's skin was a pale lavender, her eyes enormous and iridescent. She stared at him with a mixture of fear and hope. "Hey there," Jack said, his voice softer than intended. "You lost, kid?" The girl took a tentative step forward. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Help me." Jack felt a twinge in his chest, an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He pushed it down. "Look, I'm not the guy you want. Where are your parents?" The girl's eyes welled with tears. "Gone. All gone. I'm alone." Jack's mind raced. An alien child alone on the station? The epidemic? The empaths? It all clicked into place. "You're one of them, aren't you? An empath?" She nodded, taking another step closer. "My name is Zira. Please, take me with you. I can feel your kindness, your loss. We can help each other." Jack took an involuntary step back. "Whoa, hold on. I don't know what you think you're feeling, kid, but you've got the wrong guy. I'm just a trucker. I can't help you." Zira's face fell, but she persisted. "You've lost someone too. I can feel it. Your daughter." "Enough," Jack snapped, his voice echoing in the cavernous cargo bay. Zira flinched, and Jack immediately regretted his outburst. He softened his tone. "Look, I'm sorry about what happened to your people, but I can't get involved. You need to find someone else to help you with that." Jack turned and strode away, ignoring the ache in his chest. He could feel Zira's eyes on him as he left, but he didn't look back. Over the next few days, as Jack went about his business on the station, he found himself haunted by thoughts of the alien girl. He'd catch glimpses of her in crowds, always watching him from afar. Each time, she'd disappear before he could approach her. On his third day on New Horizon, Jack found himself in a dingy bar, nursing a glass of synthetic whiskey. The bartender, a grizzled Arcturian with 4 arms, was wiping down the counter. "You look like a man with troubles," the bartender observed. Jack snorted. Who isn't these days? The Arcturian shrugged his upper set of shoulders. Fair point, but you've got that look. Seen something you wish you hadn't? Jack hesitated, then decided he had nothing to lose. What do you know about the empaths? The ones who died in the epidemic? The bartender's eyes narrowed. Nasty business, that. Why do you ask? I think I saw one. A survivor. A kid. The Arcturian leaned in close. Listen, friend. If you did see one, forget about it. Those that are left, they're dangerous. That empathy thing of theirs, it's not natural. They get in your head, make you feel things you don't want to feel. Best to stay away. Jack nodded, but he couldn't shake the image of Zira's pleading eyes from his mind. As he left the bar, a commotion down the corridor caught his attention. A group of rough-looking humans and aliens were gathered in a circle, jeering and shouting. Jack's instincts told him to walk away, but something drew him closer. He pushed through the crowd, his heart sinking as he saw what had drawn their attention. In the center of the circle lay Zira, curled into a ball, her small body shaking with sobs. One of the men, a burly human with a shaved head, was drawing back his foot for another kick. Without thinking, Jack surged forward. He caught the man's foot mid-swing, using the momentum to throw him off balance. The man stumbled, crashing into his companions. What the hell do you think you're doing? Jack growled, positioning himself between Zira and her attackers. The shaved man regained his footing, his face contorted with rage. Stay out of this, old man. That thing is a menace. It should have died with the rest of its kind. Jack's hand hovered near his blaster. She's just a kid. Back off, now. For a tense moment, Jack thought the man would attack, but something in Jack's eyes must have given him pause. With a final sneer, he spat on the ground and walked away, his companions trailing behind him. As the crowd dispersed, Jack knelt beside Zira. She was bruised and bloody, but her eyes were fixed on him with a mix of gratitude and wonder. You came, she whispered. Jack felt something crack inside him, a wall he'd built years ago beginning to crumble. He gently helped Zira to her feet. Yeah, kid, I came. Let's get you patched up. As they walked away together, Jack knew his life had just become infinitely more complicated. But for the first time in years, he felt a spark of something he'd thought long dead. Hope. A new beginning. Commander Vel's office was a stark, utilitarian space, much like the man himself. Jack stood at attention, his face a mask of neutrality as Vel paced behind his desk. Mr. Harper, Vel said, his voice clipped and cold. I understand you've had an encounter with our station's unwelcome guest. Jack's jaw tightened. If you mean the child who was being beaten in the streets, then yes. Vel's eyes narrowed. That child, as you call it, is a dangerous anomaly. The last of a species that should, by all rights, be extinct. Its presence here is a threat to the safety and stability of this station. She's just a kid, Jack countered, struggling to keep his voice level. Scared and alone. How is that a threat? Vel slammed his palm on the desk, causing Jack to flinch. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Harper. The empaths aren't like us. Their abilities. They can manipulate emotions, influence decisions. Who knows what that creature is capable of? Jack thought of Zira's trembling form, the fear in her eyes. It didn't square with Vel's dire warnings. So, what do you want from me? He asked. Stay away from it, Vel said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Complete your business here and leave. Forget you ever saw the empath. For your own good and for the good of this station. Jack nodded stiffly, knowing better than to argue further. As he turned to leave, Vel called out one last warning. And Harper, if I hear of you interfering again, there will be consequences. Don't test me on this. As the door slid shut behind him, Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His mind raced, torn between self-preservation and the pull he felt towards Zira. He made his way back to the Stargazer, his sanctuary among the stars. As he entered the familiar confines of his ship, a soft voice called out to him. Jack? He turned to see Zira standing in a corner, her eyes wide with fear. "How did you get in here?" he asked, a mix of surprise and concern in his voice. "I followed you," she said simply. "I had nowhere else to go." Jack sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "You can't stay here, kid. It's too dangerous." "Commander Vel—" "I know what he said," Zira interrupted, her voice trembling but resolute. "I can feel his hatred, his fear, but I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to survive." Jack studied her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. He thought of Sarah and the pain of losing her. Could he really turn his back on this child who had no one else? "All right," he said finally. "You can stay, but you have to do exactly as I say. No wandering off, no using your abilities. We keep a low profile, understood?" Zira nodded, relief flooding her features. "Thank you, Jack." He managed a small smile. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long journey ahead of us." As the Stargazer lifted off from New Horizon Station, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the brink of something much larger than himself. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. And with Zira by his side, he knew he wouldn't be facing it alone. The journey begins. The first few days on the Stargazer were a whirlwind of adjustment for both Jack and Zira. She was curious about everything, her empathic abilities making her a quick study. Jack, in turn, found himself opening up in ways he hadn't anticipated. One evening, as they shared a meal in the ship's small galley, Zira asked about Sarah. Jack hesitated, the wound still raw despite the years that had passed. "She was my daughter," he said finally. "Smart, kind. She loved the stars, wanted to explore them, just like her old man." Zira's eyes shimmered with understanding. "What happened to her?" Jack's throat tightened. "An accident, on a station like New Horizon. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Zira reached out, her small hand covering his. "I'm sorry, Jack. I can feel your pain. It's so deep." Jack pulled his hand away gently. "It's in the past," he said gruffly. "We need to focus on the present, on keeping you safe." As the days turned into weeks, Jack and Zira settled into a routine. She proved to be a quick learner, helping with the ship's maintenance and even learning to navigate. Jack found himself unexpectedly grateful for her company. One day, as they were passing through a particularly treacherous asteroid field, Zira's abilities proved invaluable. She could sense the shifts in the asteroid's paths, guiding Jack through the perilous course with an uncanny precision. "You're a natural," Jack said, his voice filled with admiration. Zira smiled, a rare expression of genuine happiness. "I've always been able to sense things. It's how my people communicated, understood each other. Without words, just feelings." Jack nodded, feeling a pang of sorrow for her lost people. "Must have been something." "It was," Zira said softly. "But it's gone now, and I have to find a new way to live." As they continued their journey, Jack began to hear rumors of a resistance movement, a group of rebels fighting against the oppressive regimes that had sprung up in the wake of the epidemic. They were rumored to be based on a remote planet, hidden from prying eyes. Jack's curiosity was piqued. The thought of joining a cause, of fighting for something greater than himself, was appealing, and he couldn't deny the potential safety it might offer Zira. One night, as they were charting their course, Jack broached the subject. "Zira, have you ever heard of the Resistance?" Her eyes widened. "Yes. They fight against those who seek to control and oppress. They're heroes." Jack chuckled. "Heroes, huh? Well, I'm no hero, but I was thinking, maybe we could find them, see if they could use a couple of strays like us." Zira's face lit up with hope. "Do you think they would?" "Only one way to find out," Jack said, setting a new course on the nav computer. As the Stargazer altered its trajectory, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was heading in the right direction. A new alliance. The planet Miria was a stark contrast to the bustling space stations Jack was accustomed to. Its surface was covered in dense forests and jagged mountains, with clear blue skies stretching endlessly above. The coordinates they had received from a trusted contact led them to a hidden base deep within the Mirian wilderness. As the stargazer descended through the atmosphere, Jack and Zira prepared for their introduction to the Resistance. Jack felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. They had no idea what to expect. The landing site was a concealed clearing surrounded by towering trees. As the ship touched down, a group of armed figures emerged from the foliage, their weapons trained on the newcomers. Jack raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "We're here to talk," he called out. "We seek the Resistance." One of the figures, a tall woman with a stern expression and a blaster at her hip, stepped forward. "Identify yourselves. I'm Jack Harper, and this is Zira. We were told you might be able to help us." The woman studied them for a moment before nodding. "Follow me. But be warned, any false moves, and you'll regret it." Jack and Zira followed the group through a series of narrow paths, eventually arriving at a hidden entrance carved into the side of a mountain. The woman led them inside, the temperature dropping as they descended into the cool, dimly lit tunnels. They were brought to a large chamber where a group of people were gathered around a holographic map. The woman who had greeted them motioned for silence as a middle-aged man with a commanding presence stepped forward. "I am Captain Elias Thorne, leader of the Mirian Resistance. State your business." Jack stepped forward, his voice steady. "We seek refuge and a way to fight back. Zara here, she's an empath, the last of her kind. We need a safe place for her, and I want to help your cause." Thorne's eyes widened slightly at the mention of Zira's abilities. "An empath, you say? That is rare indeed. And you, Harper, what skills do you bring?" "I'm a pilot and a mechanic," Jack said. "Spent most of my life in space. I can fly anything, fix anything." Thorne nodded thoughtfully. "We can always use more skilled hands, and if the girl truly is an empath, she could be a great asset. But know this, joining us means risking everything. Are you prepared for that?" Jack glanced at Zira, who nodded resolutely. "We are." Thorne extended his hand. "Welcome to the Resistance." As Jack shook Thorne's hand, he felt a surge of determination. The path ahead would be challenging, but he and Zira had found allies in their fight for survival. Together, they would face whatever dangers lay ahead, united by a common purpose and the hope of a better future. Trials and tribulations. Life within the Resistance was grueling, but fulfilling. Jack quickly integrated into their operations, his skills as a pilot and mechanic proving invaluable. He worked long hours, repairing ships, flying reconnaissance missions, and occasionally engaging in skirmishes with hostile forces. Zira, under the guidance of Thorne and other leaders, began to hone her empathic abilities. She learned to shield her thoughts and emotions, a crucial skill for protecting herself and her allies. Her natural talent for sensing danger and detecting deceit made her an essential part of the Resistance's strategic planning. One evening, as they gathered around a fire in the central courtyard of their hidden base, Thorne shared stories of past battles and victories. Jack listened intently, feeling a sense of camaraderie he hadn't felt in years. "Tomorrow," Thorne said, his voice carrying a note of urgency, "we launch a major offensive against an enemy stronghold. It's a risky move, but if we succeed, it will cripple their operations in this sector." Jack's pulse quickened. "What's the plan?" Thorne outlined the mission, detailing their approach, objectives, and contingency plans. Jack's role would be to pilot a shuttle carrying a strike team to the heart of the enemy base. Zira would remain at the command center, using her abilities to provide real-time intelligence. As they prepared for the mission, Jack felt a familiar mix of excitement and dread. He checked and rechecked the shuttle, ensuring everything was in perfect working order. Zira, sensing his anxiety, approached him in the hangar. "Are you scared?" she asked, her eyes searching his. Jack smiled wryly. "Always am, kid, but that's what keeps me sharp." Zira nodded, her expression serious. "Be careful out there, Jack. I don't want to lose you too." Jack ruffled her hair affectionately. "Don't worry, I'll be back before you know it." The mission began under the cover of darkness. Jack piloted the shuttle with precision, weaving through the enemy's defenses. The strike team, led by Thorn, infiltrated the base, planting explosives and gathering vital intel. Zira's voice crackled through the comms, providing updates and warnings. "Jack, there's a patrol heading your way. Take the left corridor." Jack followed her instructions, narrowly avoiding detection. The mission was going smoothly, but as they were making their escape, an alarm sounded. The base went on high alert, and enemy forces swarmed their position. "Jack, we're pinned down!" Thorn's voice was tense over the comms. "We need an extraction now!" Jack's heart pounded as he maneuvered the shuttle into the extraction point, dodging enemy fire. The strike team boarded quickly, but as they lifted off, an enemy missile struck the shuttle's rear thrusters. "Hang on!" Jack shouted, struggling to maintain control. The shuttle lurched and veered wildly as they raced through the atmosphere. With Zira's guidance and Jack's piloting skills, they managed a crash landing in a dense forest, the shuttle coming to a grinding halt. Jack groaned as he unbuckled his harness, his body aching from the impact. He checked on Thorn and the rest of the team, relieved to find them mostly unharmed. Thorn clapped him on the shoulder, a rare smile on his face. "Hell of a ride, Harper. You saved our asses." Jack grinned despite the pain. All in a day's work. As they made their way back to the base on foot, Jack felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. They had dealt a significant blow to the enemy, and despite the setbacks, their resolve was stronger than ever. Back at the base, Zira rushed to greet them, her face a mixture of relief and worry. "I was so scared," she admitted, hugging Jack tightly. Jack hugged her back, his heart swelling with affection. "We made it, kid. We're still in this fight." The battle for myriad weeks turned into months as Jack and Zira became integral members of the resistance. They faced numerous challenges, from supply shortages to fierce battles, but their bond with the other members grew stronger with each passing day. One day, Thorn called a meeting to discuss a critical development. The enemy had discovered the location of the Resistance's base and was planning a massive assault. The Resistance had no choice but to make a stand. "We can't let them wipe us out," Thorn said, his voice resolute. "This is our home. We fight here, or we lose everything." Jack nodded in agreement. "What's the plan?" Thorn outlined their strategy, a daring defense that relied on every member's skills and determination. Jack would pilot a key defensive ship, while Zira would use her abilities to coordinate their forces and anticipate enemy moves. The days leading up to the battle were filled with intense preparation. Jack worked tirelessly on the defensive ship, ensuring it was ready for the fight ahead. Zira, meanwhile, trained with the other leaders, honing her empathic skills to a razor's edge. On the day of the battle, the tension was palpable. The Resistance members gathered in the courtyard, steeling themselves for the coming fight. Thorn addressed them, his voice filled with conviction. "Today, we defend our home. We fight for our freedom, for our future. No matter what happens, we stand together." As the enemy forces approached, Jack took his position in the defensive ship, his hands steady on the controls. Zira's voice came through the comms, calm and focused. "Jack, they're coming from the north. Prepare to engage." The battle erupted in a cacophony of blaster fire and explosions. Jack weaved through the enemy ranks, his ship a blur of motion. Zira's guidance was invaluable, her abilities allowing her to sense the enemy's plans and relay them to the Resistance fighters. Despite their efforts, the enemy forces were overwhelming. The base shook with the impact of heavy artillery, and Jack could see their defenses beginning to falter. "Jack, we need to hold them off a little longer," Thorn's voice came through the comms. "Reinforcements are on the way." Jack gritted his teeth, pushing the ship to its limits. "We'll hold, Thorn. Just get those reinforcements here fast." As the battle raged on, Jack noticed a squad of enemy soldiers breaking through the front lines, heading straight for the command center where Zira was coordinating their efforts. His heart pounded as he realized the danger she was in. "Zira, they're coming for you. Get out of there." But Zira didn't leave her post. "I can feel their intentions, Jack. They want to disrupt our communications. If I leave now, we lose our advantage." Jack's hands tightened on the controls. He had to protect her. He veered the ship toward the command center, blasting the enemy soldiers with precision strikes. But there were too many of them. Just as the enemy was about to breach the command center, reinforcements arrived. A fleet of Resistance ships, led by Thorn, descended upon the battlefield, turning the tide. The enemy, caught off guard, began to retreat. With the immediate threat neutralized, Jack landed his ship near the command center, rushing to Zira's side. She looked exhausted, but determined. "We did it," she said, a faint smile on her lips. Jack hugged her tightly. "Yeah, we did. But this isn't over yet." The aftermath. The battle for Myria was a turning point for the Resistance. They had successfully defended their home and dealt a significant blow to the enemy forces. Morale was high, but the cost of the battle was heavy. Many lives were lost, and the base itself was severely damaged. Jack and Zira worked tirelessly in the aftermath, helping to rebuild and fortify their defenses. The bond between them grew stronger, forged in the fires of battle and the shared determination to keep fighting for their cause. Thorn approached Jack one evening, as they were repairing one of the damaged defensive turrets. "Harper, I've been thinking. You and Zira have proven yourselves time and again. We could use more people like you." Jack wiped the sweat from his brow. "What are you saying, Thorn?" "I'm saying we need to expand our operations, recruit more allies, gather more resources, and I want you and Zira to lead one of these missions." Jack felt a surge of pride and responsibility. "We'll do it. Where do we start?" Thorn handed him a data pad with coordinates and mission details. "There's a colony on the outskirts of the system. They've been hit hard by the enemy, but they have resources and skilled fighters. Convince them to join us." As Jack and Zira prepared for their new mission, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer just survivors. They were leaders in the fight for freedom. As the Stargazer lifted off from Myria once more, Jack looked at Zira, who was seated beside him in the co-pilot's chair. "Ready for another adventure, kid?" Zira smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Always." With a shared sense of hope and determination, they set course for the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would fight for a future where freedom and peace were more than just a distant dream.